Have you ever looked at a massive monument, something everyone knows, and thought, could I actually buy that? It sounds like a bad joke, right? But what if I told you that nearly 100 years ago, one man didn't just try to sell the Eiffel Tower, he actually pulled it off. Twice. This is the unbelievable story of Count Victor Lustig, the man who convinced some of the smartest businessmen in Paris to buy 7,000 tons of scrap metal. To understand this story, we have to go back to 1925 Paris. The Eiffel Tower, that iconic symbol of romance and culture, was actually a huge headache. See, it was never built to last. When Gustave Eiffel finished it for the 1889 World's Fair, it was supposed to be a temporary display, a grand entrance. The plan was to tear it down about 20 years later, but it stuck around. By 1925, the city of Paris had a major problem. Maintaining this giant iron lattice structure was incredibly expensive. We're talking about millions of francs needed just for painting and upkeep. On top of that, public opinion was split. Many Parisians still saw it as a massive, rusted eyesore cluttering up their beautiful skyline. The government was secretly debating the unthinkable. Should they finally follow the original plan and scrap it? What exactly did 7,000 tons of scrap metal mean in 1925? It wasn't just a big pile of junk, it was an industrial fortune. If the government sold the tower, it would be the biggest scrap deal in French history. The sheer scale of the operation, dismantling a national monument, is what gave Lustig's lie its weight. He wasn't selling a house, he was selling history. This is where our main character enters. Imagine a luxury suite at the Hotel de Crillon, one of the most exclusive spots in Paris. Seated quietly reading the local papers is a man of impeccable style and confidence, Count Victor Lustig. He's dressed perfectly, speaks about 5 languages, and has a personal charm that could sell ice to an Eskimo. Here's the thing, he wasn't a count. His name wasn't even Lustig. Not really. He was a phantom, a master of disguise, and a world-class con artist. But in that moment, reading about Paris's Eiffel Tower problem, he saw not a burden, but a gigantic rusting opportunity. Lustig started the elaborate setup. He hired a specialized printing company, a legitimate one mind you, to forge high-quality government stationery. He then sent out secret, official-looking letters to 5 of the biggest scrap metal dealers in Paris. The letters invited them to a top-secret meeting to discuss an issue of urgent national importance. Tonight we look at the why. Why did a group of savvy businessmen believe they could buy a national monument? And why did Victor Lustig know exactly how to sell it to them? The meeting took place in another exclusive location, a private suite at the Hotel de Crillon. When the 5 dealers arrived, they were greeted by Lustig, who was playing the part of a weary, high-ranking official from the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. Lustig looked the part, tired, serious, and carrying the burden of a major government decision. He told them the cover story, "Gentlemen, the Eiffel Tower is a burden. It needs millions in repairs that the city simply cannot afford. The decision has been made. The tower will be sold for scrap, but this must be kept absolutely secret to avoid a massive public outcry and political scandal." This was genius for 2 reasons. He explained that they, as the most reputable dealers, were chosen for this highly confidential bidding process. First, the secrecy made the deal feel exclusive and time-sensitive. Second, selling the tower for scrap wasn't completely unbelievable. It was something the city had considered before. Lustig watched all 5 men carefully, looking for his mark. He didn't want the most skeptical one or the one with the least money. He wanted the one with the biggest ego, the hungriest one. He found him in André Poisson. He was what the French call nouveau riche, new money. He had built up a fortune, but he didn't have the history or social connections to be part of the true Parisian elite. He was desperate for prestige. Lustig saw it in his eyes. Poisson didn't just want the thousands of tons of scrap iron, he wanted to be the man who made the big historical deal, the man who shaped the future of Paris. Lustig invited Poisson to a private follow-up meeting. Though ambitious, Poisson still had a little doubt stirring. Why was this official moving so fast? Why the extreme secrecy? If this was a legitimate auction, why wasn't it public? Why was this official acting so quickly? This is the moment Victor Lustig performed what might be the greatest move in con artist history. Instead of trying to smooth over the doubts, he embraced them. Lustig leaned across the table, lowered his voice, and confessed. He admitted he was a low-paid government worker and hinted that for a small private fee, he could make sure Poisson's bid was the one chosen. He wasn't asking for a bribe for the Eiffel Tower, he was asking for a bribe to ensure the paperwork went smoothly. Think about that for a second. By asking for a bribe, Lustig convinced Poisson that he was absolutely 100% legitimate. Why? Because a genuine, high-ranking government official selling a national monument would be corrupt. A truly fake con artist would never risk asking for a bribe, as it would expose him if the victim was honest. But in Poisson's mind, corruption was a sign of a real government insider. It was the price of doing big business. The moment Lustig asked for a bribe, the last shred of doubt vanished. André Poisson paid Lustig the massive sum for the scrap contract, and then, on top of that, he paid a huge bribe just to secure the deal. Lustig walked away with both the price of the tower and a massive personal payout. Lustig immediately fled Paris and took a train to Vienna, travelling first class of course. He waited for the inevitable, the screaming headlines, the city-wide manhunt, the political scandal. He waited and waited. Nothing. He waited for the newspapers to scream scandal. He waited for the police to swarm, but the headlines never came. The silence was deafening. André Poisson was so completely humiliated, so utterly crushed by the realization that he had been fooled by this gargantuan, absurd lie, that he chose silence. The shame of being publicly known as the man who was tricked into buying the Eiffel Tower was too great. He swallowed the loss, kept his mouth shut, and never reported the crime to the police. He chose humiliation over justice. When Lustig fled to Vienna, he didn't just relax. He was watching the newspapers like a hawk. Every day that passed without a report was a win. The silence was his trophy. Think about the mental calculation Poisson must have made, facing ridicule from his peers, the complete loss of his fortune, and the shame of a public scandal, all versus just quietly accepting the loss. Lustig bet on the power of shame, and he won. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you want to see more stories of incredible historical heists, and don't forget to subscribe.